Are you guys on a mission to get your Yes. Yeah. I also can't go to Monday night. Yeah, I can go. I was at work Monday night, so. Wait, after. You need more time. It's not. I always read it and I was like, I don't think it's not too bad. It's not called, it's not some people can oh, really? I have friends who have known for like 10 years. Like you have like people that can do stuff. Or is that tomorrow? There's like it's gonna be oh, yeah, Josh, yeah, Aaron, yeah. It's really cool. Go to it. Go to it. I was gonna say, is there an email? Yeah, that's next week. No, it's the same thing. Yeah, I know.
I could grab your attention, what I'd like to do is to get our time started and offer prayer before I introduce our guest professional speaker tonight. So if you would bow your heads. Heavenly Father, we thank you for opportunities that you give us each and every day, and sometimes we don't see the opportunities right in front of us. We ask that you make it clear to these students the message that they need to hear through our guest, Lord, and help them to see how you work in and through all things for your good. Bless our time together. Thank you for the meal, and we look forward, Lord, to what Kevin has to say tonight. In your name we pray. Amen. So I'm going to take the opportunity. I didn't write out an intro. I looked at Kevin's resume, and it is really a privilege for me to welcome Kevin Seaman from the class of 1990, although he told me today that, honestly, probably should have been the class of 89. He can tell you a little bit more about that today. I had the privilege of meeting Kevin for the first time face-to-face this past summer, and as I heard him explain what his work experience and expertise was like, I said, we need to get you back to campus. The students need to hear you, our faculty and our staff need to hear you, and I've had an opportunity to listen in a couple of times today as he shares some of his journey with folks, and I think you will enjoy that. So let me give you the brief overview. You've heard the fact that he is a creative problem solver with a history of delivering results. He's a recognized leader in marketing and analytics. Currently, he is the principal of his own business called Results Analytics out of Rochester, a business that he started consulting in April of 2018 after finishing up at Modern Marketing Concepts in Binghamton, New York. One of the things that he will touch on tonight that you'll be very interested in, who has not heard of Southern New Hampshire University? Anyone? Like, you can't not watch television or other forms of media and not have heard of Southern New Hampshire, who's a behemoth in the online education field. But Kevin can tell you more about tonight, his responsibility in leading the marketing efforts that took Southern New Hampshire from here to here as far as a leader. He previously served as the Chief Strategy Officer for Catalyst in Rochester from 2006 to 13. He also worked previously for a company called General Dynamics, their advanced information systems in Fairfax, Virginia from 98 to 2006. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and Mathematics here from Houghton, and also got a software engineering graduate degree from RIT. He's a member of our 1883 Society, which means that he and his wife, Diane Alderman, class of 1989, just celebrated their 30th reunion here over the weekend in homecoming, but they faithfully give back to their alma mater as well. So please help me welcome Kevin Seaman.
That sounded pretty good, Carl. I should just let you do the whole thing. So I'm going to start you guys at the beginning. I start many of my employees this way with the first day. So this is a book entitled That's Good, That's Bad. Okay? I don't know, anybody seen this before in your childhood? One day, a little boy went to the zoo with his mother and father. They bought him a shiny red balloon. It lifted him high up into the sky. Wow. Oh, that's good. No, that's bad. The balloon drifted for miles and miles until it came to a hot, steamy jungle. It broke on the branch of a tall, prickly tree. Hot. Oh, that's bad. No, that's good. So this book is one that I present to, I have a series of books that is kind of in my opening toolkit that I share with interns and new junior employees that have started with me in the past. And I consider this the Data Analytics 101. The importance of context and not just looking at a number and saying, ooh, the arrow is pointing up, that's good. It's like, no, that's bad. And the dynamics that what might be good in one context is bad in another. So that's kind of where I start. So Carl pointed at that I've been gone from Alton for 30 years. Really, I started in 1985, and Carl told me I didn't have to share the stories about how when I was a student here, the gym was uphill in both directions, or that I have t-shirts that are older than you, or things of that nature. But I just wanted to set the stage. I was a computer science major in 1985. Houghton had 2 mini computers on campus. They had the VAX, and they had the VAX 1170, or it was a PDP 11 or something. But there was 8 terminals over in the science building, and we had to go wait our turn to be able to use a terminal. We handed in our computer coding assignments on paper that we printed out on the big green and white teletype printer. So there was no real way to tell if the program actually worked or not. So we handed in the coding assignments, like write a computer program to calculate the area of a circle. Right? These were the types of assignments that we did. So the internet hadn't been invented. Nobody owned a personal computer. Analytics wasn't a job. A floppy disk wouldn't hold this picture right here. Right? So, and the first Blockbuster video store opened in 1985. Anybody been to a Blockbuster video store? Right? So they obviously have been gone for a little while. They had 6,500 stores, and it was funny because I thought, well, Netflix put them out of business, but does anybody even remember the first Netflix, like what was revolutionary? You could get a DVD in the mail in 48 hours. I mean, that was amazing. So who knows what 30 years from now, 2049 is going to look like. Shirley has talked about being sort of future-proof, and how do we think about a career in some of these fields that won't exist. You know, people talk about kids that are born today will never drive. I mean, who knows, right? The future is kind of uncertain. So, I don't know. Carl introduced me. I just wanted to cover off on a couple of things. I started working in technology, and at some point I made the switch into the marketing field. So it was adjacent to the technology field. It was database marketing. So one of the first big things I did in marketing was build a database of every consumer in the United States with all the thousands of fields of information that we knew about them, and we sold that for marketing. That was what we used to call direct mail, baby. You know, it's and in some respects it's making a comeback because it's, you know, what's old becomes new again. So I have experience both in technology, in marketing, in systems, CRM. There's a few things that I have particular domain expertise in from having worked in over the years. One is I know more about selling oil changes than anybody you will ever meet. So if you have any particular interest in that, you can ask me. I also spent about 8 years selling lawn service for Scott's Miracle-Gro. So running their national lawn service analytics and customer acquisition program. I've been married to my wife for 29 years. She's an artist, and I have 3 kids. All 3 are managing to be in college at this moment. The youngest is 19 and is unfortunately still living in my house. So that's me. So when I was starting out, the advice that I got was from somebody I knew that said, here's some career advice. Do a job that hasn't been done before, or follow an idiot. And so I've taken that to heart, and in most of the jobs that I've done, it was something that was it wasn't a job where somebody posted a job and hired me for it. It was that somebody hired me and made a job for me, because I don't know why that is. I guess if I did some personal reflection, I might find why that is. But you know, people found a way to use my talents that maybe didn't line up with a box with a regular job description, right? So and so I don't know that I've been real thoughtful about my career path and how I've moved from place to place, but Lord guides our steps, and doors have opened, doors have closed. You know, I've been fired from jobs that have gone away, and I've, you know, and then woken up the next day to have a job working somewhere else. So the Lord, you know, I think students of today should plan on being fired from a job. You should plan on not that your job doesn't define you, that you define you, and the job is something you do, and you know, who knows where you'll end up. So we talked today about business intelligence and analytics. So statistics, here's a cartoon. You know, statistics is a little bit out of vogue. It was machine learning for a while, but what folks have told me, if I really want to draw a crowd, I need to talk about artificial intelligence. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. AI. Did you know that, Carl? Sure. So here's just a, let me ask first of all, is there anybody here who didn't have to be here? There's a few that came voluntarily. So it wasn't a class assignment? You didn't have to, but extra credit? Anybody else extra credit didn't have to? Shirley? Dave? Okay. And you guys are mostly business majors? Who's not a business major? What do we have here? Music ed. Look at that.
Equine management.
Equine management. We talked about online horsemanship program. What do you think about that? Who knows, right? Okay. So here's one of the other books that I share with my with my first-time employees, right? So here's an example of a graph that shows two things that are pretty clearly that these two things are related, right? So in the analytics world, one of the things we do as a first step is a correlation matrix or something like that. So here's you would look at these things and say, wow, these are fantastically correlated. One of these must be causing the other. In this case, the correlation is a 98.9, which means they're perfectly in lockstep with each other. Well, in actuality, right, this is the divorce rate per 1,000 people and the margarine consumption per person. Right? So it is not uncommon that to find things that are correlated with each other. In fact, in the data science realm, this is one of the problems with reproducibility and in some of the studies that folks do with what they'll call a meta-analysis or go mine data. This fellow here, Tyler Vicky, took a bunch of students and they mined existing data sets from the census and other places to find things that are related. So the correlation between Atlantic hurricanes and draft picks by the Boston Celtics. Right, so this is an entertaining book. The thing I try to get across to those junior employees is that you know, things are not always as they appear, right? So it's often, and in some cases there's two things that are correlated with a third thing that really explains it, but it's kind of a light way that I talk to those folks about making sure that you're not just skimming the surface, right? I make fun of marketing people a lot. I'm really a marketer at heart, but it's not uncommon. I make jokes about the fact that they just want to see the blue line that goes up. Right? Just show me the blue line that goes up. And so I share this with them from time to time. It's not uncommon for some of my PowerPoint presentations to sneak a few of these in now and then. So fabulous prizes. Let's see. Let's have a trivia question. It's in my notes, Carl, that I can't see on this because I can't see what's behind the screen. One of these people that didn't have to be here today, the true volunteers, doesn't count you. Let's see. In the Back to the Future 2, what year did they go forward to in the future? I need an answer. Go ahead.
Was it 2018?
It was not. Yeah. That wasn't it either. All right, anybody?
2016. 2015.
2015 it is. So that was the future in Back to the Future. What's your major?
Equine management.
Equine management. Okay. So one of the things that Carl thought might be interesting is to talk a little bit about the 5 years I spent at Southern New Hampshire. So I had been working at an agency in Rochester, doing some of that work, selling oil changes, and had the opportunity. Someone called me and said, "Hey, Kevin, you happy at how's your job? Are you happy? You want to do something different?" I said, "Talk to me." He said, "Looking for somebody to come out and run analytics in New Hampshire." I said, "New Hampshire?" He said, "Don't worry." His wife explained to my wife, "It's a marriage extender. Your husband will leave on Monday morning, and you'll be happy to see him go, and then he'll come home on Thursday night, and you'll be happy to see him come home." And so, it was right. It was like added dog years, like dog years, added years to our marriage. So there was, and Southern New Hampshire had grown from, when I started there was about 15,000 students. I left there in 2018, but now it's about 130,000 what they call active students. Now that's a bit of a vanity number because they count anybody that has been a student in the last year, so they play fast and loose with some of those numbers, but it's really more like 100,000 students in all. And for a second trivia question, you'll have to collect your prize later. Do anybody have an idea of what that equates to in terms of like a revenue number? I'll give you a hint. Anybody? So, nobody has a guess. We'll use the Price is Right method.
200 million?
All right, that's a number. It's actually approaching $1 billion in annual revenue as a university. So, I guess I didn't have to give that prize. And now they refer to that as this sort of mega university. There's 2 or 3 in the U.S. that are of that scale. Western Governors University and Arizona State are about in that same size from a student count basis. So how does this relate to AI? So what I'm going to talk about is the importance of AI in working in the analytics space. But I'm actually going to talk about the other AI. The other AI is not artificial intelligence. The other AI is actual intelligence. This is another example. I hand this particular picture out to new employees. I have a version that's doctored up a little bit. But this is the kind of the parable of the 6 blind men and the elephant. Each one has a handle on a piece of the elephant, and this is what you find in a lot of businesses. You find that individual business units or departments or job functions have a view of their little piece of the world. But what makes an employee valuable is if they can look to their left and they understand what's happening over there, and they can look to their right and they understand what's happening there. They're in a great position to be able to add value to business by somehow shortening the path between those two things, or figuring out how to add value. So so having that overall business view. So my advice is understand the business you're in. So you folks will graduate, you'll go into a job, you'll have some things you learned here. But in that first job or in those internships, you'll get some basic domain knowledge, and that domain knowledge is what's going to carry you to the next job. That you can either move into somewhere that's in that same domain or somewhere that's adjacent. So you can say, well, I don't know, maybe I don't understand this particular thing, but my job is in membership services, and so I understand how a membership business works, or so to understand the dynamics of the business. So when I do consulting for other schools, one of the things that I try to bring to the marketing domain is this understanding of the business of online higher education. So how do dollars in produce dollars out, and how does that work? So obviously, you know, the folks that, like Shirley, are worried about the mission. They're worried about all these things. They're worried about, you know, student success, student retention, graduation, employment. You know, the students get jobs. What are the outcomes, right? But ultimately, there's the business of running the university as well. And so there's somebody that's worried about, okay, what's the revenue per student? What does it cost to deliver the educational product? Ultimately, you know, what's the margin that's available on a student basis? Because that's what needs to cover the, you know, the fixed costs of the university, or the other things that go on, right? And then on the marketing side, the key metric that drives, especially in the online world, is this metric that's cost per new start. So in the online world, we're not constrained by dorms, right? We can literally, the online schools can sign up any student that they can entice to join, right? And if they fill the sections, they'll make a new one. And so literally, you know, we weren't really encumbered by some of the issues like yield management, like understanding, well, how many offers did I make? How many students accepted it? Well, how many have deposits? Are my dorms going to be too full? So in essence, some of that is really a harder problem than what we had in the online world. But this is how the business worked. And we were always trying to make sure that this over here was bigger than this over here. And whatever was left over was essentially margin that they could use to fund new programs. They could fund refugee education in Syria. They could fund, you know, soccer stadiums on campus. You know, Southern New Hampshire University is a not-for-profit, so the money didn't go to shareholders, but it went somewhere. And there was plenty of it. So when I talk about the business of online higher ed, right, or I talk about understanding the business you're in, you know, understanding the whole view of how the business you're in makes money as a business. Obviously, there's how the product gets delivered is important, but it's also if you can have that top line view of how something over here affects something over here. One of the things I will help businesses work through is that maybe the way to be more profitable is not to acquire more students, but maybe to acquire students that are going to retain past the first term or second term, that ultimately will deliver more, you know, that will deliver more value as a student, be more likely to graduate, have better outcomes versus just chasing more noses that are, you know, at a certain cost. So, anybody got an idea of what a school, you know, that's an online school like Southern New Hampshire, University of Phoenix, schools like that pay to acquire a student? Like what a reasonable number over here might be? Hello? Anything?
200.
Anybody? I mean, this is the Price is Right method, but I really don't want to award a winner to a 200. 2,500 would be delightful. Anybody?
$5,000.
So $5,000 is probably about the typical, it's probably a typical number. Who's had $5,000? You? Somebody else who didn't need to be here. I have a prize for you. So $5,000 is about right. So on an annual basis, that was about an average number for what the cost per enrollment was for a new student. Now, a lot of that there was two places that went. Half of that went to what you would consider traditional, like marketing dollars, media, television, Google, so a ton of pay-per-click and Facebook and those other media channels. But a lot of it went to what we would call student enrollment or origination costs, like admissions, financial aid, CRM technology to support that. The marketing costs in the business. So the marketing costs for online universities can be substantial. I think so Google in 2018, there was an article in Inside Higher Ed this morning. They referenced a number that I thought was a little high, but Southern New Hampshire, they said Southern New Hampshire spent $47 million with Google in 2018. And so those dollars were for keywords like online MBA, online college, psychology degree online, and those keywords are bought and for as much as $100 a click. Right? So if everyone pulls out their phone, searches for online college, and clicks on something, you'll just have collectively cost somebody $4,000. So, my team, what my team worked on for that during that time was how do we take this marketing investment over here and maximize the number of new students over there. So that could be with managing online advertising. We built advanced algorithms to evaluate the effectiveness of television. So a television spot runs, what do we get for it? Well, in the old world when there was 3 networks on TV, it was like dropping a boulder into a pond and you would see a wave and you'd say, great, that's what it did, right? We had on spots on cable television. There would be dozens of spots on every hour from the DIY network to the cable access probably, right? Where hardly anybody sees it. So that was like throwing a handful of gravel into the pond and being able to find the outcomes from that wasn't something that you could see. When we ran spots on Dancing with the Stars, I remember sitting at home with one of my colleagues watching Google Analytics in real time, and you could just see the leads coming in from the website, like microwave popcorn. Boo, boo, boo. It was, you could see that, but ultimately when the marketing is so diversified, it becomes really complicated to tease out the signal and the noise. And so we use a technology called fractional attribution. That's a methodology for being able to award a little fraction of credit to different marketing touch points based on regression and different algorithms to be able to say which of these things should I be doing more of, which of these things should I be doing less of. So that was something that we spent a lot of time. So one of the other things that was really important was to be able to explain things to the business. A skill that isn't in my nature, but I've gotten better at, is trying to visualize and show things to folks that they can show. So I just threw this in here, but when we're trying to actually solve for how do you solve this problem, the answer isn't to solve from here to here. The answer is, well, we've got to go and look at each of these steps in that journey and figure out how we can type that up. So, and it starts with understanding the data, developing a strategy, and then implementing that strategy to be able to say, okay, I can make a 5% improvement between folks that submit an inquiry on the website and students that answer my phone call by doing A, B, C, D, and E, measuring it, optimizing it, lather, rinse, repeat, over and over again. So these are the types of things that, you know, and it's funny, you can do fantastic algorithms, but I remember when I presented this slide for the first time, they said, oh, I love that slide. I said, you don't even know what it says. They said, yeah, but it's pretty. So, you know, so that's that translation layer I think is important as folks that are in the data business to get past. So, and then I had a similar one on the kind of on the student side, which is where the different parts of the student journey. So here's another book that I have shared. I'll award this to our other friend over here, but even though I'm a data guy, relationships matter. Because, so I first awarded this book to a friend of mine in marketing, and she and I would argue till you know, from like dawn to dusk, because she was in charge, the budget was hers, and she didn't want my opinion on how it should be spent. So I gave her this. She was not amused when I gave it to her. Now she's one of my best friends, and in fact, I've recently done she's a CMO somewhere else, and I'm doing a consulting engagement for her right now. But the Illustrated Book of Bad Arguments, which is, so it's important to also be able to make an argument and to be able to have the trust and relational capital with your coworkers to be able to talk to them when they're making an argument that's not, we'll call it, that's not intellectually sound. And that comes by being in a position where you have the trust and capital to be able to make things happen. So one of the things I used to be a lot more of a data nerd, and I've become more of an action guy. So because without action, analytics is useful. When I look at my resume, Carl, you'll see all of my big achievements really showed up on somebody else's scorecard. So I did great work in being able to help with develop a program to improve student loan repayment rates and stop students from defaulting on their student loans. Well, that initiative was the crowning achievement of the financial aid director. But it was my idea. I wrote the business plan, put his name on it, developed the algorithms, helped him hire the vendors to do it, built the models, and I had, I'm fine with the fact that Tim's a rock star for making that happen, right? But if you're in the analytics space, you better plan on not getting credit for that, right? So I look back and my team created these models. We created an algorithm that predicted student failure with 97.31% accuracy, right? That was like our 5th attempt. We had ones that got better and better and better. But ultimately, that provides no value to the business. We could predict it. We would run a report. We could celebrate ourselves and say, look how smart we are. We predicted that student would fail, right? Ultimately, that's not a business outcome. So ultimately, what we ended up being able to execute was by leveraging partners and leveraging that partnership. I worked with student advising. It took us 2 years, but we developed a systemic retention solution that retained, they approximated, I think these numbers might be a little funny, but 1,100 additional students per term, and would, when fully implemented, net 4,200 additional graduates over a 5-year period. So it's not that algorithms alone don't create business value. So analytics never made anybody a dime without the ability to take those analytics and implement them. So that's one of my learnings, and so now I'm an action guy. What slide's next, Carl? I don't know. Woo. Here we go. Celebrate ignorance. Ignorance is my superpower. So I used to know it all, but what makes me most valuable is that I can recognize how little I know. So the smarter I get, the less I know. But what I do know is how to find the people who do. And so as I celebrate the value of a true professional, and I understand that I am not that, I can then find someone who can deliver that excellently. So one of the things I would ask every employee, or every interview, and some other folks at different companies, we would do it as a bit of a joke. Right? So we would say, could you please rate your skills in Microsoft Excel from 1 to 10? Would everybody want to, just shout out the number? 1. So some of you folks might be more self-aware, but almost to a man or to a woman, the answer was 8. So the second question I would ask is, why do you consider yourself an 8? And they say, well, I'm an 8 because I know how to change the color on certain cells, or I know how to do a VLOOKUP, or say, have you done a pivot table? No. Right, and so, and in the guy that I had working for me who was the smartest guy I ever worked with, I asked him, David, how do you rank yourself on Excel? He says, I'm an 8. Because there's this guy I met that's a 10, right? And he's just amazing. And so David was my 10. I would say, well, I'm an 8. But folks didn't always have the calibration to know where they were on the whole spectrum. So we often talk about this inverse correlation between competence and confidence, that people who are the most confident are not always the most competent, and vice versa, right? So you can have folks that are quite competent but maybe don't present themselves confidently, but often there's folks that have a lot of bluster that really don't know what they're doing. So I've really celebrated my ignorance, and I'm willing to wear it. I don't have the shirt on today that says celebrate ignorance, but I would challenge you to challenge yourself to say, am I as smart in that area as I need to be? And if not, then who do I need as a mentor, or what do I need to do so that I actually know what I'm doing, versus just be able to kind of, I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night, right? So, and some of the value I bring to companies as a consultant is I know what's possible. I don't always know how to do it, but I know that if we poke over here, there's opportunity. Don't ask me, exactly how to do it, but I also know who to call, and and how to connect those dots. So it's not about necessarily being an expert in everything, but it's being aware enough, if we go back to the elephant, that you know what the whole picture looks like, how the business gets monetized, how the technology you're using works, how to connect one thing to another, and ultimately find people who can close those gaps. So to cap that off with I don't think that Solomon or David back in the day were into data science, but they understood that some folks confidently know everything, and other folks seek advice and look to gain wisdom from others. So that's that. So that's the end of my prepared remarks, Carl. I don't know what time it is because I can't see the clock on my computer. 10 after. So I have time for some questions. There's some things here. Equine management is not on my expertise. I'm rather ignorant of that subject, but I know someone who could answer your question if that's what it's about. So, analytics, marketing, higher ed, offshoring. I've engaged offshore teams at different places I've worked. Anybody wants to talk about any of those things, or I'm more than willing to offer an opinion. The guy that didn't have to be here.
My name's Corey. So my question is, we were talking about how there's kind of a flood of advertising now in typical channels that you would use, like TV or something like that. What do you find is a creative way to get around that in today's environment?
So one of the challenges, right, is to be able to stand out and be something, you know, and be able to get the students' attention. So we look at the marketing as there's two different components. Like a TV is creating demand where it may not be. So people didn't wake up this morning and think, I'm going to go back to college. They're sitting on their couch watching, you know, HGTV, and an ad comes on, and maybe it inspires them to think, oh, maybe I could do that, right? But the second side is those that are searching for and considering an online degree or improving their life or things like that. So that's where search, you know, that's where things like search and targeting, things like that come in. So a lot of the digital advertisers will now even let you target, you can target YouTube ads at people that are in the market for higher education. So if you search for online degrees or visit a college website, go to YouTube, you know, you'll see 3 or 4 ads that come up for, you know, other competitors, and that's because those folks are advertising, you know, trying to target an audience that's, you know, that's already in the market. That tends to be more efficient because those folks are already in the consideration set versus targeting a broader audience, many of whom may never be interested. So typically, universities will start with things that are closest to the bottom of the funnel, so students searching for the program. Equine management degrees, right? So, and if you search for equine management degrees, you know, I would hope Hope College would pop up as an option. If you know, and then they would move up the food chain towards things that are less specific, and when you're in those channels, those tend to be harder and harder to make work. Okay? That's a long-winded answer.
Thank you.
Dave.
Another guy that didn't have to be here, by the way.
Okay.
What did Southern New Hampshire University do to improve their outcomes from what's basically an online schooling situation? Typically have had poor outcomes over compared to on campus.
Yeah, so they did a couple things. If I go back to this picture, right? So I said that they committed as a university to educating every student that marketing brought in. So we didn't have entrance requirements. There was no filter. If a student could come in, fill out an application, you know, they had the wherewithal to pay for an online degree. Those students could start. But academics committed to then educating those students. We had 500 to 600 academic advisors who were essentially, if you think of them as your own personal academic coach. Those academic advisors had access to your online behaviors. Have you logged in? Have you done the assignments? What's your grades? What's, you know, sort of what's going on? And and you had that advisor for the length of your program. And those advisors were expected to be in contact in some fashion with every student every day. That wasn't, every student didn't want that, but that was pretty robust because the faculty really weren't expected to deliver that, right? The faculty were delivering the academic content, but the life parts. And those advisors were doing everything from almost social work. Because a lot of our students weren't most of our students had failed at college before, to be frank, right? Whether they'd failed, flunked out, or quit, 3/4 of the online students were students that had done some college but hadn't been successful, so or fully successful, right? So they needed some of those. You know, you'd listen to call recordings where students are saying, "Yeah, I didn't do my homework because I couldn't pay my internet because, blah, 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 or I missed my assignment because I was in court all day because my husband took my kids, or, my car got repossessed and I couldn't, I mean, literally the barriers that a lot of these students were going through were often in the way of them doing the online degree work, right? So it wasn't, you had to help them try to solve these problems. It wasn't always a slam dunk for these problems. So, they were ruthless, right? With trying to solve both electronically and analytics. We built models that would predict which students are going to succeed, so that you could intervene early, right? So you might have a student that gets a C the first week, and we would say, no, it's okay, right? That student's okay, but another student that gets a C the first week, and you say, no, that student's not okay. Right? That's you need to intervene now before, especially with 8-week terms. It was often, if you waited till after the midterm, the die is kind of cast. It's hard to make your way back from a D at week 5 when there's 2 weeks of academic. So, anybody else? One more?
Yeah, I have a question that's kind of twofold. So if someone was interested in the field of analytics as a career or as a career starter, what would your advice be? And regardless of what their career pursuits would be, would you encourage some data science education, knowing that that's available here?
So I happen to be a little biased, right? I think that the world revolves around data. Other people disagree. But we agree to disagree. But I would encourage at least some basic understanding of how to frame an argument, how to analyze data, because more and more the world is becoming data-driven. And if I wanted to get a start in the field of analytics, I think there's some different courses, right, Deb, that would be considered more of an exploratory analysis or data analytics course that would kind of wet people's whistle. And they could see Deb Price. Is that correct?
Any last questions?
It's your last chance.
Kevin, thank you. So what you need to know is he has been here basically all day on campus, lending his expertise to our faculty and staff as we think about the future of Hope College and what we need to do in the fields of analytics and data science, online, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm grateful. Thank you for taking time, your valuable time to be here. Thank you for being part of this dinner. This is a token to say thank you.
Thanks,
and don't be a stranger.
Okay.
Not that far away. We appreciate it.
This is my copy. So that's why it's a little dog here. If anybody wants to reach out, I guess LinkedIn would be a fair way to do that. And, or wants to